Hello, everybody. My name is CJ. I'm a co-developer of the 3.x software company, software products. And today I'd like to make a video just giving a basic overview of the Excalibur software as part one in a series of tutorials. Our Excalibur software isn't really a program that we built from the ground up. Instead, it's an add-on that we developed for Blender. Blender is a free 3D CAD software that we basically just made a bunch of plugins to try to angle it towards a dental application. We give it away for free because of the fact that we don't really have the infrastructure or the ability to provide support for it, as we are also running a dental lab at the same time. And it's just the two of us kind of doing all of this. So as a result of that, we figured it would be better to just kind of provide some video tutorials on how to operate the software and just kind of get away from a traditional support model. So if you do have questions and concerns or anything like that, you can contact us through the website. But just be patient with us because we'll be able to get to you when we can get to you. It's not going to be something that we're able to prioritize at the moment. So, our software, basically, like I said, it's based on Blender. So if you're familiar with Blender in any way, shape, or form, then this is going to be pretty easy for you. Now, the control scheme that we use is from basically another plugin of Blender that's called B for Artists. So that's actually what we really built everything off of, was B for Artists, which is, again, a free version of Blender that you can download. But we found that it had a more kind of logical workflow in terms of control scheme and appearance and things along those lines that made it a little easier to operate than just vanilla Blender. So that's what we're going to be using here. So you can see in our splash screen, we even mentioned that we're powered by B for Artists because that's what we built the whole software on. From here, when you get this splash screen up on the screen, all you need to do is just click away from it. Don't click on any of the options that show up on it or anything like that, because that could put you in a different place. And then from here, we can just kind of go through some controls. So I'm going to just start off by importing a couple STL files. So I'll click on that button over on the right-hand side, and I'll just bring those in. So I've got a couple ready to go down here. Just grab these two and import them. And it'll take a moment to bring them in. But once they're in, that's what we're going to be looking at. So these are just raw STL files or scans that were done on a Trios system. We're not able to bring the colors over from Trios or anything like that. But I just wanted to go over navigation. So you can see down here in this left-hand corner, I've got an overlay that shows what I'm clicking and what I'm pressing when I'm pressing it, to hopefully help clarify exactly what I'm doing. So to rotate your view of an object, you're just going to right-click and drag, and that'll allow you to rotate. Where you click does matter. So like if I'm clicking here versus when I'm clicking here, it makes a very big difference on the way everything gets oriented. Another thing that's important to know about when you're operating our software is this outline right here. So there's an orange outline and a yellow outline. When there's an outline showing on an object, you can see this a little better here, that means that object is selected. So the primary selected object is going to be the yellow, and then a secondary selected object is going to be orange from there. When the object is selected, that means that you're able to manipulate it and move it in relation to the scene. So when I right click and drag, you'll notice that this little circle up here in the top right that shows the X, Y, and Z axes of the scene, those rotate as well. Because really what I'm doing is I'm moving my view around the object. I'm not actually moving the object itself. To demonstrate what that would look like, I'm going to need to use a keyboard shortcut. So let's say I select just one model just to kind of demonstrate what I mean. If I right click, again, I'm just rotating my view around the scene. But if I choose to rotate it, which can be done pressing R on the keyboard, now I'm actually moving the object in relation to the scene. Notice that circle in the top right is not moving now. I'm actually moving this object. So it's a very important distinction between moving your view and actually moving objects in the 3D space. So it's very important to understand that concept. So when we go to do alignment, or when we go to do surveys and things like that, moving on as we get into more complicated things, it's going to be important to understand that rotating our view isn't going to necessarily change anything in a lot of those situations. It's going to come down to actually moving the objects in relation to the scene. There's also a little helper you can use, is these red and green lines showing up. These can actually show the orientation of the object again in relation to the scene. So if I were to select both of these at the same time using Shift, then I can rotate them together. And they'll stay in alignment with each other, and I can get them in alignment with the scene. So that's one of the basics, simple things to understand. Zooming in and out is done by rolling the scroll wheel, and it zooms towards the mouse. So if I zoom away right here, I want to get a closer look at this area right here on the right. I can just put my mouse over that area and just start rolling up, and I'll be able to get a closer look. Scrolling back down, I can zoom away. So yeah, it's all about where your mouse is pointed. That's the direction your zoom will move. Clicking the middle mouse button, like I just did there, kind of do things instinctually now with the software, so it's hard to stop myself, will allow you to pan the object around the screen. So you can see we can move it that way by pressing the middle mouse button down instead of rolling it like a wheel. We're just clicking it like a button. All right. Then one more thing is that the left mouse button. The left mouse button typically, no matter what you're doing in the software, will apply a function to the objects that you're working on. So if I left click and drag right now, my tool that I have selected is tweak, which allows me to move the object. So right now that's what that'll do. If I left click and drag, it'll move whatever object is selected on the screen. And it's moving it in relation to the way I'm looking at it. So if I look at it from the bottom and move it, again, it's just going to move in relation to that. So again, that's actually moving the object if I left click. If I make a mistake, I can always use Control Z, just like any other Windows program or anything like that. Control and Z will undo your previous click or the action you've taken. It won't undo a change in your view. It will undo an actual change to the object in relation to the scene. So those are some really basic concepts, moving around in 3D space, clicking and dragging. The keyboard shortcuts that we use the most are R and G and S, I would say as well. So R allows you to rotate an object, which I did earlier. And notice there's this little, it might be a little hard to see, but there's a little black dotted line and then two black arrows showing in the kind of the right-hand side of the screen around the area where that red line is now. That's my mouse cursor. So as I move that closer to the origin point where that black dotted line starts, you'll notice that controlling this is a little bit harder because a slight movement of the mouse actually does a big change on this. The further away this is from the origin, the easier it is to control. So it's really important to understand. I can move it closer or further away as I'm rotating, and that can help. And if I happen to make a mistake, let's say I put it like this and I didn't want that, before I click, let's say like I have it here, I'm like, oh, that's not where I want it to be. I want to just get it back to where it was. Instead of left clicking to place it, notice I haven't clicked at all, I've just pressed R. If I right click, it'll snap back to where it was as if I never clicked it in the first place. So that's really important too. It saved my life a couple times where I accidentally hit S, which is our size button, and do something like this. I'm like, whoa, that's not what I meant to do. Right click, I'm back to where I was. No harm, done. So it's a very quick kind of like save thing. And again, if you do happen to accidentally actually apply it, then at that point we can just Control Z and get back to where we were as well. So this is one of the beauties of digital work in general, is the fact that you can always undo to get yourself back to where you were. I think that covers it at R and S. The only other thing left is G, which G grabs. So in this case, it does the same thing as the tweak function, but the way to remember it is G for grab. So if I press G on the keyboard, I can move the object around 3D space like that. Beyond that, all of those functions can also work exclusive to one axis. So for instance, if I want to move my object along this red line here, which, I mean, it could be anywhere. It could even be, south of the red line or something like that. If I press G and then I press X, because X is the color-coded coordinate. If you look in the top right in that circle that we talked about earlier, you can see it up there. The X axis is red. So if I press X, you'll notice that a red line shows up on the object. And now when I move my mouse, it'll only move along that axis. Oh, lost it. Right click. If I do the same thing with Y, G, then Y, I can move it up and down along that axis this way. And then lastly, G, and then Z, we'll want to look at it this way because Z is the vertical axis in this case. G and Z, that'll move it up and down. Okay, so the X, Y, and Z keys on your keyboard will allow you to isolate the movement that you're doing. That becomes important specifically when we're placing mounting pegs, which we'll talk about in the next video. and that applies for everything, including size, rotation. So a lot of times I'll rotate on the Z-axis to spin something around. You can rotate on those as if it's on a stake or a spit or something like that. So I hope this gives you a general idea of the controls. That way, as we're moving forward, I don't have to stop to explain exactly what each of these functions are. And of course, because this is a video, you can always feel free to stop it, slow it down, and check out those input overlays that I'm using, so you can tell exactly what keys I'm pressing and when I'm pressing them. All right, that does it for this video. Thanks for watching.